I have
Save it for the pod.
I took my my relative surplus value pills, so I think I'm ready to record. That's Andy's.
It's a good name for info.
His idea, yeah, like his idea for an ad for Adderall.
Yeah, there's just a guy walking around like with the clock ticking. He's like, I feel like absolute surplus value right now. I can only work for 8 hours.
And then a capitalist pharmaceutical executive shows up, and he's like, "Well, I have just the thing for you." And like, there's two salmon-colored pills.
Yeah.
And he's like, what does he say? He's like, try some relative surplus value.
Or how about his boss comes to his desk and says, "Hey, we're gonna need you to triple your output in 1 hour
Oh
less."
my God.
He's like, "Oh no, how am I gonna do that?" And then a doctor.
Speed.
On my ad for Adderall?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, keep going. This is good. So then what happens? The doctor
This should
comes-
go on the pod.
The doctor comes in. He's like, "Sounds like you're suffering from absolute surplus value."
And then at the end, like it's like a shiny, happy future where
Uh-huh.
the guy's like just at his desk, just typing away like a fucking madman, and the boss is giving a thumbs up in the background.
And then we use my tagline, blow Adderall, not deadlines.
Boom.
I like it.
Yeah, we should write
Beautiful.
copy for like a very small Marxist demographic of people out there. I
Like,
think,
what am I doing with my life?
yeah, Antifada promotions. We could have a PR company. Yeah.
Sounds like a Michael Brooks thing.
Well, yeah. as as socialism becomes more acceptable, I think perhaps there might be a niche market for like obscure value references within commercials and stuff.
Make value theory great again.
I thought you said Nick
Indeed.
Value for a second.
Make value theory great again.
It's
Get
a
your
great
McValue
McValue
meal.
for your
McValue.
money. Maximize your McValue, abolish the McValue form. It's going to be great.
Abolish the McValue menu.
It's like use value, exchange value, and McValue. Those are the three kinds of value
That's like
in
some
Marx, right?
Yes, I think that's.
The great Marxist philosopher Ronald McDonald.
I never
came up with
finished
this theory.
theories of surplus value. So maybe
I never learned about the trifold character of the commodity.
Where's
There's one
the
that's
Hamburglar fit into all
Dude.
this?
Sesame bun, special sauce. There's like the song, right, about the Big Mac.
Uh-huh.
I don't know it. I'm not a capitalist.
Grimace,
shell.
Grimace is lumping as fuck, right?
I mean, he's lumpy.
The Hamburglar is lumping.
I think the Hamburglar is the capitalist.
No, he's lumping as
No.
fuck, dude.
No?
He's an
He's-
illegalist.
He's stealing.
He's not,
He was
I
stealing.
guess I'm trying to figure out if like the stealing of the hamburgers is like allegorical or literal in the narrative.
Oh,
He
like-
steals hamburgers from the company and then like leaves one out for the people.
I guess there's a reason why like Ronald McDonald is like so happy, right? Because he's like
Ronald
he's sitting on
McDonald
top
is
of
the
the
fucking
system.
capitalist.
Yeah, he's
Oh,
sitting
yeah.
on top of the
He's
system.
like the smiling face of capitalism.
But he's
He
also
owns your ass.
He's also that like that philanthropic guy too, right? Because there's like the Ronald McDonald Foundation, so it's like Bill Gates giving away all his money to privatize schools and shit. You know, Ronald McDonald sit on his lap. You know, he definitely won't get a boner because he's his Happy Meals are.
He's a clown, and the clowns are not creepy at all.
No, nothing ever bad happened
They're
with someone dressing up
sexless
like a clown.
units.
Because his like blood pressure is like so fucked up from eating French fries and burgers, he can't get it up.
Well, if Donald Trump can survive off that shit, Ronald McDonald's gonna live for 1,000,000 years. It's gonna be 1,000-year Reich. Oh, that's a hell of a way to start a show.
Wow. Well, are we
Are
starting?
we recording?
We are.
Oh, that's great. I'm so glad that that's
yeah.
I'm so good.
Cold open, guys.
The Antifada is more than a podcast. It's a specter haunting the globe.
It is the synthesis of the two most frightening things for the cheerleaders of this reactionary hellworld.
One ravaged by the unbounded savagery of capital and its states.
Antifa super soldiers and Intifada.
Bash the fash in a global uprising.
Be prepared to enter.
The Antifada mindset. I'm Jamie Peck,
I'm Sean KB.
And I'm AP Andy.
and we are broadcasting not live from Leftist Best headquarters, about a half-hour walk away from the gentrification-ravaged Gowanus Canal, in the coastal elite bubble of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA.
That's right, and we are very happy to welcome our returning guest,
First ever returning guest, folks.
Aaron motherfucking Petcoff.
Pwah, pwah.
Hey everyone.
Yeah.
So Aaron was on, what, our second ever episode?
Number 2.
So, like, wow. I guess you can tell us if we've made any progress since then, or...
How much you've all grown. It's beautiful. It's wonderful to watch, you know,
Your children grow up.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's not get ahead of ourselves.
You guys are going to be leaving the house soon, starting college, coming back and living with your parents again.
In this day and
Dad
age.
did let us back in the basement, so that is pretty apt for
Thanks,
today.
Sam
Thanks,
Cedar.
Dad.
Yeah. If you notice
Dad Cedar.
a market increase in the quality of the audio, it's because Dad let us back in the house.
Hell yeah.
We're all in our 30s.
That was his first mistake.
You guys are saving the best for me. It means a lot.
Listen, only the best for you, Aaron.
Welcome to our basement.
So
Would you stay a while? If it seems like we've all got the giggles, it's probably because
We're high
we
as
have
fuck.
been at the
No, just
beach
kidding.
all day, which leads me to a question that we always ask here on the Antifada. I think you know what it is. And that question is, how pure is your hate today?
Aaron.
Extremely unpure. It's barely detectable.
Yeah,
I feel very relaxed from the beach.
mine's
That's kinda what I was
yeah,
getting
yeah,
at.
The beach was lit.
Yeah, the beach was so fucking nice.
Oh my God.
You can't hate after you get back from like the sand and the surf and friends and
Especially not when you're full of juice and dreams.
Yeah, we love to give shout outs on this show, and big motherfucking shout out to Juice and Dreams, which is not even a company. It's probably just a guy.
He's not a businessman. He's a businessman.
That's right. And he wears, what was he wearing? Bob Marley
Bob Marley
shirts?
shorts. Beautiful Bob Marley shorts.
I'd say it was cultural appropriation, but given his accent, I think that is totally within his rights to wear those. He gave us a great deal on some bulk nutcrackers. And I'm not sure that our national or international audience really knows perhaps what nutcrackers are. Does anybody want to enlighten the folks?
Well, these were actually just like cocktails in a plastic container. Like usually the nutcrackers that you get on the beach are kind of gross, but good. They basically taste like frozen like cough syrup mixed with a slushie. And it's like basically grain alcohol and a whole lot of sweetness. But this was actually like a well-mixed cocktail.
That's why the shout out goes to Juice and Dreams. But the regular nutcracker is kind of an institution, I'd say, right, in the New York City beach community.
I never actually had one. I go to the beach all the time. I know. It feels really embarrassing to admit.
Whoa.
Oh, you never see the guy walking around saying ice cold beer,
No,
rum punch
I mean,
here.
of course I see him.
You don't buy it?
No.
All right.
Yeah, I mean, today I was like, I've learned from experience not to drink these because bad stuff happens. And he's like, what happens? I'm like, oh, I just get really drunk.
Yeah.
Spoiler
He's
alert.
like, that's not bad.
I usually just bring my own booze, but
Well, the nutcracker's great in a pinch because A, it's like just filled with sugar and filled with alcohol, and it's like, why like schlep your fucking alcohol to the beach when there's a guy that just walks up and down with a cooler yelling nutcracker, nutcracker, and you buy it and you drink it and it's cold and it's good and it fucks you up.
And now that we're broadcasting it, it's gonna go away probably.
Damn it!
Oh, no.
Like all good things, right?
Wow.
Like,
Oh, yeah.
Let's like Andy and I were talking about this earlier at the beach. Like, and I think Jamie and Aaron, you guys probably know this too. But where we went, Fort Tilden. I'm kind of doxing us. If anybody wants to find us on a Sunday, they'll probably know
In
where
a
we
very
are.
vulnerable state, might I add.
Indeed, semi-clothed. But yeah, there's an awesome, bizarre beach area called Fort Tilden on the Rockaway Peninsula that's actually not even part of the city. It's part of Gateway National Park. So there are a whole set of rules, different rules apply. It basically means tits
Maritime
out,
law.
dicks out.
it's international waters, basically.
Pretty much, yeah. So you can smoke whatever you feel like smoking, drink whatever you feel like drinking. Every once in a while, like a horse cop will come by, but it's not even a cop; it's a park official, so it's like not even a big deal.
In fact, if you don't have an open container and at least part of your genitalia exposed, they might ask you to leave.
That's actually happened.
That's
to Jamie.
maritime law.
That's
the
maritime.
future liberals want.
Pretty much.
I mean, if that's what the liberals want, then they should come to the left because we want even more.
Nice.
I want maritime law to include everything up to 3,000 miles from the ocean. But yeah, the fucking Fort Tilden, over the last like 4 or 5 years, it went from this really out of the way spot and like
And a gay beach.
and a gay
part
beach.
of it.
Yeah.
It's like
Well,
a gay,
still is.
naked, awesome beach.
Still is to an extent.
Been
right?
invaded by breeders.
Yeah, it's
Fucking breeders.
It's changed a lot. So it was it's called Fort Tilden because it was literally like a fort, and there's all these old weird abandoned buildings there and shit. And
I've peed in many of them.
Kind of desolated. And 4 or 5 years ago, before they started sending like private fancy buses down there from like the hipster parts of Brooklyn, you could go.
Those fucking hipsters in Brooklyn and Bushwick. Fuck them.
It turned like what was kind of like what our best favorite pedo anarchist Hakeem Bey would call a temporary autonomous zone into a bit more of just a normal beach, but it still has some of its charms. It's still a good place to go.
It's like the Tattoo Beach. It's if you want to see the very standard Sailor Jerry flash, that's the place to be.
Pretty much, yeah.
I remember.
As
yeah,
Aaron
look at
points
him.
to his giant bicep with the Sailor Jerry on it.
It's where I go whenever I want to remember I'm an individual just like everybody else.
That's right.
Remember when we were going to go to the beach with your mom, babe? And I'm like, oh, should we take her to Fort Tilden? And you're like, I'm not taking my mom to the titty beach. I'm like, what?
Which is so fair. I mean, do you want to go to Titty Beach with your mom?
Yeah, I would totally.
well.
But maybe I have a different kind of relationship with
Well,
my
you're
mom.
a daughter. I'm a son. It's totally different. I mean, my mom is an anarchist, but like we don't go that far.
Okay, so anarchism, totally fine. Boobs, not fine.
I'd rather anyway. Let's just move the fuck off this topic. I think what I wanted to say was like, you know,
We're about to put like Sean on the couch. Like,
no, dude, seriously. No, I have therapy tomorrow afternoon. I mean, you guys just gave me mad ammunition for that shit. My therapist, if you're listening, just take notes. This is what we'll be dealing with tomorrow. Tilden is like
I'm trying to think of like a Freud accent. Like, Sean, why do you not want to take your mother to the Titty Beach?
what is it
How
about?
does this make you feel?
I think she might get a kick out of it.
She moved out of the city, so it's all for
My friend had to. Sorry, this is a bit of a sidebar, but my friend had to quit. Like, seeing it, he had to break up with his therapist because he found out while he was talking to his therapist was like drawing doodles of like women with enormous tits.
What?
How did he find
He
out?
turned around at one point. And he heard the page like flipping, and he's like, "What the fuck was that?" And turns around and sees him drawing. He's like, "What are you?"
That's like something out of Family Guy.
Dude, it was the funniest fucking story. He's drawing like It's Always Sunny style like Dennis doodles of like women with enormous tits.
Very
He's like,
interesting.
my friend
Wait.
was like, I cannot see a
Can your-
therapist.
therapist
That's like,
then.
Can your friend give me a recommendation?
Maybe that's how he takes notes. You know, it's like all the parts of the guy's subconscious.
Look, people-
represented
I want
by
to see the anime
dictated
porn
women.
therapist.
People like to break it down because, you know, Freud had a lot of children. So there's like the Jungians, like Lobster King. You know, there's like the Reich, you know, type people. Not Third Reich, but Wilhelm Reich. But I think that ultimately the way you can break down the whole field is by tits or ass.
If you
so
draw
your
titties.
psychotherapist is either a titty guy or an ass guy.
Pretty much. So
That
do we
one
wanna-
really just did not pop at all.
Devolved.
You know,
It was like, let's move on.
Can't land them all. So, speaking of ruining things, I recently went to a DIY show at this newish space in Bushwick, and it was really exciting for me because it reminded me of shows I'd been to, like, I don't know, 10 years earlier, like my early years in New York. I'm like, I'm so glad that this is still happening somewhere, and it's just moving farther and farther out, and it's still good. This is still good, right? There was like noise, there was punk, there was techno at the end. My friend Sophie brought me there. Shout out to Sophie,
Sophie, what's up?
friend of the show.
She's in Australia. Hi.
Yeah. And then I found out later that, I mean, I guess I can say the name of the space now because it's fucking gone. It's called Heck. It was called Heck.
All good things are
R.I.P.
gone.
Heck. And then I found out later, Andy told me a story that made me really fucking angry.
What's the story? Andy, what's the story?
Well, there was a very charming BuzzFeed quiz that went viral. Of
What was the quiz?
Which shitty Bushwick dude did you date? I think it's called.
Hard-hitting journalism.
So it
right
says
there.
like what bar did you go to in Bushwick? What DIY show did you go to afterwards? And then the DIY spaces were, I think, 2 of them were not legit venues that probably did not want to be in a viral BuzzFeed quiz. And there's no evidence that the place got raided because of being on this viral quiz, but it did get raided just a few days after the quiz, and people were concerned because of the quiz before the raid that there might be a raid. So to all our friends out there in media, if there's something really cool going on, despite your best temptations, if it's underground, if there's illegal activity going on, just don't blog it, don't tweet it, don't, just keep it away from the fun police who
On
are
it-
the real
Seriously.
police.
That is actually, like, I think the worst journalistic mispractice that we've seen, malpractice, I should say, since the yellow journalism about the USS Maine in Cuba that brought us into the Spanish-American War of 1898. I'm shocked and appalled by it. And if we have to go to war with anybody, let's go to war with BuzzFeed this time.
Yeah,
We
Like
should
Buzz
because they just closed their French offices.
Did they?
Yeah, they closed their French section. In
were
Les
there
Auvergnats.
labor
Mon
issues?
Dieu.
Were there labor issues? There were, but we're gonna get into that later, I suppose.
Oh, okay. I heard that they tried to fight the union when the BuzzFeed union happened.
The French one. I don't think BuzzFeed is union.
No, Jonah Peretti circulated a fucking memo explaining why
Oh.
unions
Oh,
are
that's
not right for
right.
BuzzFeed. But we can get to that later.
Yeah.
So I think we're all pretty happy right now.
Couple
Feeling good.
nutcrackers will do it. The beach, Tilden.
Well, yes, this too. We've had some. It's been a crazy week. We've had some real setbacks for the left. We've had some good stuff. Let's start with the good stuff. Fucking shout out to Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez.
Hell yeah.
You won. That was really awesome when you won.
You shocked the shit out of mad people.
Yeah, I think it shocked even herself, judging from the video.
Yeah.
No kidding.
And it's like we talked about it the other night at the DSA meeting because the DSA worked really hard on her campaign. And we had field offices in Queens and the Bronx, both. And we took a minute to just let it all out and feel good about it because we don't usually get concrete wins like that.
Sure.
And when
Especially
we
in
do,
a week like this.
yeah.
Oh, God.
And when we do, it's important to enjoy them before getting back to work because we have a lot of work left to do. So
When I found out about it, I was as shocked as anybody else. Not that I followed it that much, but I was sitting on coffee break in a horribly industrial section of New Jersey in the middle of fucking nowhere, an industrial wasteland at work. And the news that she won popped up on my feed, and I was like super hyped. And then by the time I was done with work, Janus had gone down,
Oh my
all the
God.
other horrible shit, and Kennedy had retired, the Supreme Court justice.
Yep.
So I was like, feeling pretty decent about the world for I don't know, 3 or 4 hours, and then
it was a real roller coaster ride of emotions that day.
That is what it was. Yeah, I'm trying to remember. I remember feeling really good about about AOC's victory, because of the Muslim ban being upheld, and then I felt it was we had this loss, but then we had this win, but then right after,
all the losses.
yeah, it was a real roller coaster for comrades.
I think earlier, you said it was a real loss for the left. I mean, I think if you look at these decisions, it's just a loss for humans,
Yeah.
American humans. You've got the Muslim ban thing, and then you've got the racial gerrymandering, which was upheld. Oh yeah, racial gerrymandering, that's cool. Keep doing that. And then Jamie, I think you wanted to go off on this one, the crisis pregnancy centers thing.
Yeah, in a minute.
Oh,
First,
are we doing good news first? I'm sorry.
first, I wanted to play a bit of lighthearted audio. People argue back and forth a bit, or at least, people I know, about whether Ocasio-Cortez is a democratic socialist or a social democrat. I think based on most of what she has said in public, she's a social democrat, which is fucking fine compared to what we have now. It's fucking great.
Yeah, I'll take it.
We can be friends with social democrats, right, guys?
It's a huge improvement over what we have available to
Yeah,
us.
no
You
fucking
guys were
shit.
social democrats.
Andy's
Oh,
shit.
that is a burn coming from Andy.
Andy's fucking around on his phone. He's like, "You reformist trash. Fuck all of you."
Mensheviks.
We are, hey, one
Reformist
man's
treasure.
reformist trash is another reformist treasure. So, but no, so
I'm for reforms, frankly.
but she, ooh, okay.
That's a very
Damn,
controversial.
I just got daggers.
You're
straight
kicked
at
out
me.
of the ISO.
But make those cricket
Just
sounds.
kidding.
Do the cricket sound drop after he says that for 5 minutes.
Anyway,
I'm fucking with you. I'm
You go back
fucking
and
with
forth, whether is she a democratic socialist, is she a social democrat, whatever. The point is, she's out there saying the S word on the television to Stephen Colbert, and a lot of people have joined the DSA since then. It was a bigger bump in our membership than either the Trump win in 2016 or J20. We got over 1,000 new members in 24 hours after she won, which is fucking insane. And they're now doing segments on MSNBC, doing their best job trying to explain what democratic socialism is, because a lot of people have been Googling it. So I just wanted to play this. You know, it's really important here at the Antifada that we do political education all the time for ourselves and our listeners. So I just thought this was a really good introduction to the world of democratic socialism.
From noted Marxist Stephanie Rule.
Welcome back to Velshi and Rule. With Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's primary win Tuesday night here in New York, the term democratic socialism was the most searched term on Merriam-Webster's website.
Why would
so
you
what
go
are we
there?
talking about here? The word most people focus on is socialism. But while democratic socialists pull some ideas from that ideology, they are not traditional socialists. There is no call for communal ownership of production.
Pause it. Counterpoint. Yes, it is. You guys listening can't see it right now, but it's got the word socialism and stamped with a big old not.
Not you. Not socialism.
Oh, I totally want workers to control the means of production. Not.
Psych. Shut the fuck up.
But you know what? Let's hear her out.
Here's what else it is not. Communism. Most people use communism and socialism interchangeably, even Karl Marx.
Even
but
Karl
communism
Marx.
is a political
He uses it
ideology,
like
while
that?
socialism centers more on economics. They're related, but none of this has to do with democratic socialists. What they do call for is the enactment of certain socialist ideas through the democratic process, meaning everyone
Aaron's
has a
rolling
vote
his eyes
on
right
whether
now.
they are a good idea or not. In many countries, democratic socialists work alongside other parties in broad coalitions. Their goal is to control prices of essential services like medicine, banking regulations, affordable education, and the ability to work. All sounds reasonable. All of
The
that
ability
is
to
in the
work
effort
is
to
what
minimize
socialism is all
economic
about.
inequality and allow everyone in society to not just survive, but have the ability to thrive and enjoy life.
Meritocracy,
A
yeah.
concept they call bread and roses. And if you think some of these
That's a little
ideas
out of
are too
context.
alien
Yeah.
to
Lenin
American
was a
culture,
socialist when he
take a
said
look
that.
at this. Social Security is a pension system run by the government. Medicaid and Medicare are government-run medical services. Even Amtrak is a government-owned transportation system.
Shout out to Amtrak.
All
Which
of
is
these
why it's
are
being
hallmarks
defunded,
of
by the
democratic
right and the
socialist policy.
Right. This is the important part. Joining us now, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez,
All right.
the Democratic nominee.
Oh, they did it right before she came on. That's adorable.
I like that guy.
Wow.
Fucking hate
So,
the news. Fuck these
how do
people.
you feel, guys, about how socialists are fighting really hard for your ability to work?
That whole segment right there like has me very conflicted because on the one hand I think anything that ups like the idea that there's an alternative to this fucking hellscape that we live in is cool. On the other hand, there's like a very like concerny sort of piece about like don't be scared by socialism.
Yeah.
It's like a nice thing. Like, you know, the roads are socialist. Like this very fucking bullshit argument you hear all the time. Like, you know, we have a mixed economy. Like
Anytime the government does stuff, that's
the
socialism.
military's socialist.
Well, it's just like the whole idea. I mean, like what the left definitely doesn't need right now, and what the left definitely doesn't need right now is people who are not part of our project apologizing for us. But maybe that's why they're doing it because it's precisely not what we need. But I mean, the whole idea. I mean,
Well, it sounds like they're not apologizing for us so much as trying in good faith to explain what we are and what we do, but not representing us that accurately. But I'm also like kind of fucking fine with it if that's what normal people think socialism
Because
is.
they're representing it actually in a
Yeah.
generous
And
way
then-
that's like kind of like mainstreaming it in a sense.
Yeah.
And
Which
then-
we hate, but like is worse
That's
than them
true.
shitting on it. I
And
don't
once they show up to the DSA meetings, we can tell them what it really is. And, you know, maybe they'll stay, maybe they won't.
when they become a level 2 operating democratic socialist thetan, then we tell them that we actually want to abolish the value form, money, and we want to basically just do full communism in like 3-4 months.
I mean, I don't even think we need to tell them. The second they get involved, it's going to be like, you know, full luxury gay space communism in 3 months.
For themselves.
What's
It's
like, there's that meme like right after there's that like 2017 meme or whatever, like that was like me at the beginning of 2017 holding up like a Bernie Sanders sign and me after, and it's like Stalin did nothing wrong.
Nice.
That's very memic because Stalinism is huge on the Twitter and left book left.
They did a nice job describing social democracy, though. So, like,
I mean, I
it's
think-
not so far
I
off.
mean, I think that's incredible that like what's happening right now is that, I mean, for the first time in decades and probably over half a century, I don't even think this level of discourse and mainstream conversation about like socialism, I mean, it certainly didn't happen in the 60s, I don't think. And the idea that like now this is like becoming such a mainstream idea and you know, and something that people actually have to reckon with on like in you know, big news outlets and in you know, in mainstream political institutions, they actually have to start talking about it, which
it's good as hell.
It's incredible. Yeah,
I mean,
that's
even
the
the
good part.
fact that they have to do a segment about this on MSNBC is like awesome.
yeah. If the worst thing that's happening in mainstream media coverage of socialism is that they're misclassifying us by like watering down what we want, that's a good problem to have.
Yeah, they're basically like sheepdogging people into like becoming communists, and I'm cool with that because once they meet us, they'll realize that like communism is way cooler than fucking just watered down bullshit they're talking about. So you know,
Indeed.
Also, if we won half of the stuff that they're talking about on that,
we want pretty much
hard.
everything she talked about except for the ability to work. We want to deprive people of that. It's true. Not the ability, but like the necessity. The
so
necessity.
long as capitalism exists, right? I mean, the only thing worse than being exploited is not having anyone like buy your labor.
that's one of my favorite terms, right? Yeah, the only thing worse than being unemployed under capitalism is having a job.
Yeah. Like the federal jobs guarantee is a good example of that, right? Because as long as we're going to have capitalism and people have to sell their labor power in order to survive, it would be great to create a floor that jobs can't go below. And that's what the federal jobs guarantee is trying to do, right?
I'm not sold on that shit, to be honest with you. Like, there's a big debate between the federal jobs guarantee and the UBI right now. But
Why not both?
Well, yeah, sure, both is fine. I think they're both like, you know, better than what we have now. But I think you got to kind of almost go back 100 years to get back to the old concept of lessening the work week. Like a very radical program would be every year you phase down the work week 1 hour, like 40, 39 till you get to like 20 hours a week at the same pay. Of course, that would have to be the policy. And that does all the things that the UBI is supposed to do and the jobs guarantee is supposed to do, but it frees up tons of time for people to do all the other shit in their lives that they really enjoy.
Including socialism.
Exactly.
Flah, flah. And it's also
we
fun.
should get like an air horn.
I mean, why get an air horn when you have a fucking human beatboxer right here, folks? It's
That's Jamie's second job or third job.
It's also funny to me to watch people realize how radical a lot of DSA folks actually are. Like, there was someone holding up a sign at one of the rallies the other day that said abolish profit. And some fucking shit lib was like, LeMayo, abolish profit, ha ha ha. And Shuja Hader, the writer / DSA member, reblogged it and he said, you better believe it, pal. And it just went from there. Also, somebody kind of in a roundabout way accused my comrade Ava of being a Russian bot because she talked to the news at the ICE rally, the anti-ICE rally the other day. And they're like,
the ICE rally.
At the,
Go ICE, go.
Go
ICE,
at
go.
the hockey rink.
Deport more.
They were having a rally on the ice at the hockey rink. And she was talking to the news, and they're like, Ava, why do you hate hockey? And she's like, because I'm Puerto Rican, bitch. No. That doesn't make any sense. Is that even a stereotype? Do Puerto Ricans hate hockey?
No, it's like Jamaican bobsledding. It's
Puerto
fine.
Rican people like hockey.
They're
I
like,
can't think of one NHL team that has it. I can't think of one NHL team in Puerto
they
Rico.
were like, oh, Ava, what do you think about this ICE thing? And she's like, we want to abolish ICE. It's really bad. And they're like, but what's going to replace ICE? And she did not fucking stutter. She's like, nothing. Open borders.
Fuck yeah.
And then some right winger posted it. They're like, this is what liberals want.
No, it's what
This
fucking
is what-
socialists want.
This is the new Democratic Party. This is what liberals are doing.
Yeah, we fucking wish.
I mean, the most offensive part of this so far,
It would be
obviously,
incredible
is
if that is what liberals want.
calling
right?
my leftist comrade a liberal. But then some fucking shit lib reblogged it like, this is not what any liberals want. This is some Russian bot misinformation that you're spreading. But it was like, I mean, in a way, she was right because like my friend's not a liberal.
But so these people now think that people who look like human beings and go to rallies and do interviews are Russian robots. like they just have cyborgs now.
Oh man, they've reached the level of Westworld. You can't even tell.
Oh, fuck.
I mean, I haven't scanned her neck, so
No spoilers.
perhaps it
no
remains
season
to
2
be
spoilers.
seen.
Confirmed human being being like, it's just
Give her the test from Blade Runner.
Voight-Kampff.
I know some like actual humans
You're
on the
walking
left
across
who
the
might
desert,
not
a
pass
turtle
that
is turned on
test.
its back.
Actually,
What do
that's
you do?
true. Much of the left probably might not pass the Turing test.
It's like you're walking across the desert, a turtle's on its back. What do? I abolish ICE. The answer is always abolish ICE. That's the only thing that you can say that proves that you have empathy.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
wow.
pretty much.
I like where that went. So we have the MSNBC take on that fucking what democratic socialism means, and then I think you guys covered this pretty well on Majority Report, Jamie. The Sean Hannity, which was like a kind of like low key promotion for
So
what
good.
like reformist social democracy should be.
it was a really good list. It was like
He was trying to hate on it,
it
but
was
it
like
didn't work.
this is the new face of the Democratic Party. This is what liberals want, and it was like healthcare for everyone, free housing for anyone who needs a home, solidarity with Puerto Rico, But like the thing that really tipped the hand of whoever was having fun with that graphic that day was that they had support seniors on there, which if you know anyone who watches Sean Hannity, you probably know they're a senior.
Median age 103.
It's like definitely the one way you want to fail. If you want to fail the Voight-Kampff test, is to just like look at that list of like demands and think that any of them are bad.
Oh God, that's horrible.
Sean Hannity is definitely a fucking replicant.
Oh God, he's
That
the
would
worst
explain
person.
a lot. That is a charitable interpretation of
That's
that
true.
man's behavior and
they're-
ideology.
Well, like Sean Hannity is.
Because I guess the replicants were actually the most humane in Blade Runner, right?
They quoted way more Shakespeare than the humans. What? So we got the MSNBC take.
You mean the MS-13 NBC take?
Oh shit! You have your right wing talking points down AF.
I thought MSNBC. No, CNN is ISIS. MSNBC is MS-13.
Is that how we break things down now?
That's who owns them. That's,
really?
Yeah, that's who's pulling the strings.
What the fuck happened to Soros? He hasn't been investing
He
very
owns
well.
the DSA.
And Antifa.
I'm not saying shit.
He owns this podcast.
Shut the fuck up! We just
Oh,
got our
shit.
check.
I just doxed us.
Damn it, dude! You were gonna get a cut and you fucked it up. He's gonna take his money back. But yeah, no, we got the MS. I forget what horrible thing you called it. The MSNBC take, and then we got the Sean Hannity, who is a human penis. The worst person perhaps ever. But then there's the best broadcaster in all media. I mean, honestly, this guy has more skills than I think maybe anybody on this planet. And if we had a Alex Jones of the motherfucking left, I think we might be able to actually make some goddamn fucking progress.
Well, what do you think we're trying for here at the Antifada, babe?
None of us have Alex Jones skills. I'm so sorry. I'm looking around this room. I don't see.
Speak for yourself.
Wow. Okay. Someone's got a fucking little ego trip over here. You think you got Alex Jones material? Go ahead.
I don't know. What do you think?
Just,
Okay, this could go somewhere. Go on.
Wait, Alex Jones just entered the room, everybody.
I'm
Special
gonna drop
guest.
some real truth on y'all right now.
This is an infographic from Infowars about AOC. Go ahead and
Yes,
give
sir.
it to us. Yeah, it's really good.
Make the face of tyranny and suffering. If you think Venezuela is awesome, you'll love Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez.
They do not make her face into a reptilian in this infographic, but I really wish she had like a forked tongue or something like that coming out.
They picked the ugliest, craziest photo they could find of her, and she still looks pretty cute.
Which, by the way, the New York Post, I was complimenting them on this when she won. This is a sidebar. They had a cover that said "Red Alert."
Red
it
alert,
talked
red-
about like socialists is wins in the but the New York Post cover editor is so good that they didn't choose like Alex Jones, a really ugly picture of her. Like she looked very, very attractive and well put together because they know that it's read. The New York Post is read by a bunch of right wing crazies, but they also have giant raging hard-ons for like women, so they had to make her like look good. So it's like the double play. She's a scary socialist, but like look at this hot woman on the cover of the New York Post.
You know what?
They know what they're doing. They're fucking smart.
A light bulb just went on over my head. That might be what went on when Breitbart did a blog post about me and used a really cute picture at the top.
Oh wow! Again, your ego here. Maybe you are the Alex Jones of the left.
I was like, I know I have uglier pictures than that on the internet, and yet someone there likes me. Maybe someone's got a little hate boner for old Jamie Peck.
Jamie's gonna start selling like brain enhancing juice.
Jamie Peck and Mike Cernovich Productions.
Oh my God, that's Cernovich.com.
JamiePeck.com.
This is the same meme that has like endless government welfare as like, one of the demands.
Yeah,
Well,
it's good.
Let me read it. All right.
Do it. Do your Alex Jones.
If you think Venezuela is awesome, you'll love Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Believes in bullet points. Flooding America with illegals who vote.
Okay.
The worst kind.
Overthrowing the Constitution.
Yeah.
On board.
All right, cool. Go on.
Disarming all citizens. Never-ending government handouts for all.
Yeah,
Completely
sure.
on board.
That's a transitional program, but yeah.
Class tribal warfare against whites.
And
Government-run third world healthcare.
We shouldn't have started counting off.
We need good government healthcare, not third world healthcare.
yeah.
Government monopoly over education.
All right, we mostly have that, but yeah.
Public education is wonderful, and it's getting taken away.
Yeah.
Shut the fuck up. Weakening police while gangs run rampant.
Fuck yeah. Our gangs.
Okay, and here are the results. Y'all ready for the results? This is
Alex.
no laughing matter. Okay, we got ahem.
Hold on. I just want to say that we now have a new reality TV show. It stars me, and it's called Oops, I Married Alex Jones.
Damn right, babe.
God, sex is going to be awkward tonight. Go on. You are turning me on, but go on.
See you in the bedroom, babe. Wear that outfit I like.
The reptilian one.
The globalist.
She's the Jewish one. I don't know.
Globalist kink.
I ain't no Jew. I ain't no globalist. What are you talking about
being dragged
here?
through family court.
Say Rothschilds while we do it. Say Rothschilds.
Oh my God. Anyway.
Go on, Alex.
I got some results for y'all. All right. This is important. Pay attention. Economic collapse.
Yes.
Lawless violence.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Unending human suffering.
Yes.
Government genocide.
Fuck yeah.
The collapse of individual liberty.
Uh-huh.
Race wars.
Yep. No, actually, no. I
Mass
can't.
starvation.
Yeah.
Total brainwashing of children.
Okay.
Rampant unemployment. That's what we got. That's what's the future of the Democratic Party, folks.
Abolish work.
I love how rampant unemployment's like below government genocide. Like government genocide plus there won't be any jobs.
If you're thinking of it, what was the first one again? What was the economic collapse? If it's being like ranked in order of how terrible things are, and he puts economic collapse above everything else.
I'm not sure there's an order there. I think it's just a grab bag of things, like half things that we really want, and then half things that, like race war that we don't want.
Well,
except for my wife, who apparently is.
Also, Alex Jones.
Yes.
Wait, what? Did I just say something?
No, you went to a fugue state. We're not sure what happened to you for the last 5 minutes.
Yeah, that was really.
We'll edit it all out.
Wow, he must be even more powerful than he claims to be.
Dark energy.
That's what happens when you're taking a brain-enhancing juice or whatever.
I wouldn't know anything about that. So this does bring me to kind of a serious point, though, if I may. I know everyone's got the giggles. When people say...
Who's speaking right now? Is it Dana or Zool?
There is no Jamie, only Jones.
She sleeps above the sheet. 6 feet above the sheet.
Mm-hmm. You don't know that
she
that's not true.
sleeps 6 feet under the sheets, actually, in her like nuclear war bunker.
Yeah. With all the soylent and shit.
Oh man, yeah.
Hiding from urban
with her
mobs.
MREs.
There's going to be mobs of urban types.
Did Alex Jones just come back in the room?
Yeah, I don't know.
Oh wow, he's getting all of us. He's jumping around.
It's like I don't know. It's like The Exorcist. He jumps from person to person.
Okay, so
sorry, go on.
Anyway, one thing that stood out to me about every kind of coverage, from like the positive coverage on MSNBC to the crazy, insane coverage on Infowars, is they're like, this is the future of the Democratic Party. This is the new face of the Democratic Party. And it makes me so fucking nervous when people say that. And I realize we should probably just, keep our heads down and continue on the course that we're on, because I have read our electoral strategy. I think it's sound. I know what the fuck I'm doing. But that is not, at least I don't want to speak for the whole DSA, but after reading the document, I'm pretty
Views
damn
expressed
sure
on the Antifada do not represent that of the DSA.
I'm pretty damn sure that is not our primary or even secondary goal to realign the Democratic Party. Like, we can use the Democratic ballot line as a tactical move so that we can win, so that socialist candidates can win. But nowhere on the list of, primary to secondary to tertiary effects does it say we need to reform the Democratic Party and move it to the left. It might move to the left as a result of what we're doing. But as far as I'm concerned, the most important thing that we're doing with these campaigns is we're building our base among the working class. We're getting in touch with more people, talking to them, listening to them, finding out what they care about, getting our name out there, getting the S word out there, even if it's this nice watered down definition of socialism. It's definitely better than the Red Scares of old, when even a whisper of the fact that you're a socialist could get you totally blackballed from politics.
So
forever.
Aaron, no, go ahead.
It does that. We build our operations, figure out how to run a campaign and what we're doing. And best case scenario, we can also get some reforms that put the working class in a stronger position relative to capital, so that, when a crisis hits, when economic conditions change, when shit pops off, we're not just a bunch of wage cucks and we're ready to fucking fight.
You said the C word on the show, but that's okay. We'll accept that.
First time ever.
At least it was a female identifying person that said it. Aaron, as a individual within a international socialist grouplet, what's your take on this whole electoralism on the socialism line thing?
I think the main question is going to be this. There's going to be immense pressure on Ocasio-Cortez, right? And that's not meant to say at all, call in her question and call into question the dedication that she has to the movement that she's building. But I think that we can't underestimate the level of pressure that exists within official politics, within the Democratic Party, etc. I think that the one thing that I find important to recognize about someone like Ocasio-Cortez, in this case, and this is coming as someone who, look, I'm not an expert on her campaign, and I'm certainly not an expert on electoral politics, but just as an independent socialist, kind of observing, as a socialist, as just one speaking for myself as a socialist, observing this, I think the fact that look, she's willing to be, she seems to be willing to be held accountable to a larger movement in this case, and I think that really means something. And I think that the idea of having someone come out of a movement, run a successful campaign that inspires people to find out more about socialism and even to join socialist organizations, I think really shows that there's something to be there. It raises an important debate that is happening and needs to be had within the socialist left about how can we use the electoral not only the electoral platform, but is there a way that we can use the Democratic Party in such a way to build the socialist left without sacrificing all of our independence? Because that's the really important thing. Historically, the worst thing about the Democratic Party is that it's been the graveyard of social movements for, as far as I know, for the entire history of its organization. And that's really had severe costs on the left, right?
Yeah.
And it's a big part of the reason that we're only just now being able to come out of the margins of American politics. So we have to be very cautious in how we use it. But I think someone I think the experience of the Ocasio-Cortez campaign seems to show that there's something to there's obviously something to this that the socialist left should be debating.
Philip Foner went one step farther than that. He was Eric Foner, who is now a Marxist historian at Columbia, but Philip Foner, his father, went as far as to say that not only is the Democratic Party the graveyard of mass movements, but that the ballot box is the coffin of class consciousness. So that's the more extreme version of the same thing, right? Mm-hmm. Which is, I think, a question that everyone here and everybody listening should ask themselves, which I think you put quite eloquently, is if this is already happening, then what's our relationship to it?
Exactly.
Are we going to stand?
That's exactly.
Are we going to stand outside? Are we going to stand on the sidelines? Are we going to snipe? Are we going to, shit post with purity politics online? Or, are we going to have some relationship to this? Even if that relationship is, it could be symbiotic, but it could also be even antagonistic, but in a positive, critical way. Should we engage or should we just sit on the sidelines? And that's what everyone has to ask themselves in the U.S. right now.
I mean, I realize that this is something that seems actually like what I'm suggesting is something that seems like rather taken for granted on like many people who are coming around left politics now. And so the idea that I'm like, maybe we should consider, can we use the Democratic Party to popularize socialism in an era that exists like post like Bernie Sanders and
late pass.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like, but for where I'm coming from the left and where, and certainly like where you, like how, the left-wing tradition that you come from and that Andy comes from, is something that, for me is something that I haven't really actually seriously considered, but am now thinking that needs to be taken more seriously on the left.
I mean, I am also
So I'm having a debate to my left, I feel like.
Yeah,
I am
it's better to be
also-
having it with to your right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm also an electoral skeptic. I think there are really good arguments on both sides of this issue. Like, we really
Both
hashed it
sides,
out
people.
on episode 5 with Asher. Oh, my God. So many horror people are possessing us today. It must be those nutcrackers we drank.
What they put in those? They put ghosts in there.
They're cursed.
Juice and ghosts? Question mark.
That was an accursed margarita I had.
But, like, seeing the amount of energy and the number of people who showed up, even, like, seeing with my own eyes, the number of people who showed up to the DSA meeting last week, to my North Brooklyn branch meeting, and people who showed up to volunteer for Julia Salazar, who is actually one of us running for state senate in New York right now. Shout out to Julia Salazar. You're cool. I actually canvassed for her yesterday, and Ocasio-Cortez made a pretty good talking point when I was trying to explain to people who Julia is. I was like, well, if you like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, you will love Julia Salazar. And people really seem to respond to it. And like, I have to believe that there's a way to do electoralism that does not take the wind out of our sails and does it in a smart way while keeping our eye on the long-term horizon always. Like, we need a short-term, medium-term, and long-term goal. And I don't think anybody thinks that the revolution's going to happen tomorrow. So, in the meantime, people can't die waiting for the revolution. This is a good enough reason to do the reforms, whether or not they lead to actual socialism. But I do think there's a strong argument to be made that a lot of these reforms we're talking about put the working class in a strong position. Also, like, it's only one of many tactics that we have. And the way to do it right, I think, is when it's an organic product of a social movement. And the electoral stuff is bubbling up from these things. And it's like one of us. It's one of us representing the rest of us. As great a candidate as Julia is, it's not about her as a person. It's about the issues. And it's about talking to people about these issues and like empowering them to demand more. And if that ends up getting us the reforms in the short term, great. If all it gets us is an expanded base among the working class, that's great too.
It's just a question of electoral strategy. It's also a question of like our relationship to a party like the Democrats that has been like historically funded by by corporations, by the bosses, and has worked for the bosses. And I think that but the United States has a lot of like electoral peculiarities in our system, and I think that the question for how we engage with that seems to me to be come down to, is the candidate like running a campaign in such a way that it like builds social movements, builds our side? In other words, not just like introducing people to the idea of socialism, but actually like, are people joining organizations and coming around organizations that can outlast the ups and downs of protest through the campaign? And to that degree, how independent can we maintain, what it is that we build through it? Historically, I think attempts to kind of use the Democratic Party to popularize the far left have failed. But it seems to me that, there's been recent experiences that like kind of suggest that maybe an opening could exist, Yeah,
I mean, we're living in different social conditions than we were the last time people tried this. And like, not for nothing, I think a lot of people in leftist movements today are doing a pretty good job at welcoming new members and being nice to them. And it's a good balance of like, on the one hand, yes, there's political education. There's no substitute for knowing the theory underpinning what we're doing and why we're doing it. On the other hand, I don't want people to feel stupid if they don't know enough about it. And like, I'm trying myself because I'm like, I'm a pretty friendly and outgoing person, but like, I get tired sometimes. Sometimes I don't want to talk to anyone. Like, we really all got to do our part. And like, I think the ISO actually has a pretty good reputation as well for being like pretty nice and chill, at least among the DSA folks I've talked to.
You're thinking of the
ISO
Spartacus
people.
League again, not the ISO. The Spartacus are super chill.
I'm
ISO.
actually a member of the RCP, the Bob Vakianites.
Oh,
They're pretty chill. They actually.
How chill are y'all?
We spoke with Brett the Maoist last week and had a really
Brett the Maoist.
Yeah, Brett from Rev Left Radio. Big shout out. That was an awesome episode. And he's a Maoist. And we never actually got into a big back and forth about like what contemporary Maoism means in the United States or abroad or whatever. But you mentioned the RCP. I gotta say, they have fucking street game. Like all Maoist groups have fucking really good fucking street game. They're organized. Like when something pops off, like they come out into the streets, and they fucking they throw down.
I guess my point is we don't want to be
yeah.
like this alienating intellectual circle jerk because I feel like left movements have fallen victim to this in the past.
Totally.
And part of that is also being more, I don't want to say intersectional, but like we talked about on our two-parter episode with Justin, conscious of race, conscious of gender, conscious of like cultural differences between different people who are being in an organization together. And like, these are all good things to be doing. And I don't think any of it has to conflict necessarily. That said, I do think we have to draw the line somewhere in terms of especially who we will support electorally.
So maybe Cynthia Nixon might be a line you
And
draw.
I think, there are certainly arguments for and against, but if we endorse every progressive Democrat, I'm not sure what would be left to distinguish the Democratic Socialists of America from Justice Democrats, our revolution. Because we don't do on-paper endorsements as of now. When you endorse someone, that means we send a ton of our resources and our people over there to help you. So,
I mean, especially with the resignation of Justice Kennedy and all of the like horrible, monstrous, there's going to be this enormous pressure on socialists to like vote for whoever runs in the midterms and whoever runs in 2020. And I think that it's really important that we understand those risks on the socialist left, on the independent left, and find ways of making sure that the candidates that we run in our organizations and our movement remains independent from the wing of not just the centrist wing, but the wing of the Democrats that refuses to be held accountable to our side, that refuses to represent our positions, that doesn't have any interest in building our side, but just is interested in getting donor funding and winning elections and and being in power. And so,
like, we talked about the difference between coalition and like joining someone's organization on the last episode. I think that's a really important distinction to make. Like, it's a hard pill for some people to swallow that we can't do everything, and some stuff might be good, but we still have to go with stuff that's better. So if we have, I don't want to use a catchphrase that's been used too much, but it is a bit of a zero-sum game when you have a limited amount of resources.
Don't you see?
And it's like, we could give it to this progressive Democrat who's challenging Andrew Cuomo, or we could give it to one of our own who is a socialist, and like, we absolutely know that she will be accountable to us because she is one of us. Like, I know which one I would choose.
yeah, totally.
I mean, voting as an act itself doesn't take that long unless you live in a racially gerrymandered place where they're trying to keep you from voting, which is, a real thing that happens. We're going to talk about that in a second. But like, it's like not even an interesting question to me at this point in time. Like, ooh, should a socialist vote for a liberal? Like, I don't know, would the left be better off under Donald Trump or fucking Hillary Clinton? Like, we had a revolutionary Maoist on the show last week who voted for Hillary Clinton in Nebraska. And like, Adolph Reed wrote that article, like, vote for the lying neoliberal warmonger. It's important. And I think we're starting to see with the Supreme Court getting as fucked as it is right now that it actually was somewhat important that people voted for, oh God, I can't believe I'm saying this, the lesser of two evils. But like, that said, voting is different from where you're actually putting your resources and your energy and your time into. So like, I will always vote to minimize harm. I don't make it like a personal expression of myself, although I'm totally lying because I voted for Jill Stein in New York, where, I mean, it did...
Thanks for the Trump victory.
Right.
She was never going to lose New York.
It did absolutely
Jill
nothing.
Stein literally called the Hillary Clinton campaign and forced them to not campaign in Michigan.
Yeah.
Was it the Russian bot that controls her, or was it her? It's hard to tell.
Well, like, I think, to finish out my thought, I think on both sides of the issue, people get really hysterical about voting. It's like, it's not a big deal. Just fucking vote. It's not where radical things are going to happen. It's just not. But you got to do it. And then, vote for Hillary, oppose her from day one. Or whoever they fucking nominate this time around.
My analogy that I use is kind of a personal one, and it might be one that people out there share. But like when I was in my late teens into my mid-20s, whenever I'd go back to family gatherings, they'd be talking about television shows like Lost or like Survivor or whatever, and I'd make a big thing. I'd be like, I don't have TV. And they'd be like, oh, you don't watch it? I don't own a TV. I don't watch TV. And they'd be like, oh, wow, that's weird. I'm like, yeah, that's right. I don't fucking watch TV. It's the commercials and the fucking propaganda. Blah.
Wow. You've really improved your diction since then, babe.
I know. It's been a real progression. I took some brand marketing classes. I was working on my core brand proposition. I took speech lessons and everything like that. But yeah, like it's similar to that sort of knee-jerk like purity thing, like cooler than thou. I got to take this hard fucking line on it. I mean, I'm not a big voting person, but I agree with you that it's just not a big fucking deal. Like, don't fucking die on that hill. Who gives a flying fuck?
So, speaking of the consequences of elections, where people don't vote for neoliberal
elections have consequences.
We've seen some pretty bad decisions from the Supreme Court this week.
The first bad decision was making a Supreme Court. Can we just get rid of that? We put that on the Alex Jones Infowars list. Abolish Supreme Court.
I mean, I think that's on most of our agenda at this point in time.
Cool.
No?
We can all agree.
Yeah. Along with, we just want to fucking burn it all down. Yeah. But
don't say the B word.
Okay. Ew, cut that out. But
that's burn with an E, right?
Yes.
Burn it all down.
What?
Bernie.
Oh, I thought. Oh my god, I'm so tired. I thought you meant like BURNE. Like what?
Like David Burn it all.
I don't know.
We are talking.
Jamie's beached out.
I got the beach brain. I got sand in my brain. But no, the decisions that we've seen this week are pretty uniformly terrible. The Supreme Court upheld the Muslim ban, racial gerrymandering, the Janus case, which obviously fucking terrible, and they upheld the right of crisis pregnancy centers to intentionally lie and mislead pregnant people in order to trick them out of getting an abortion.
You mean use their freedom of speech to save the unborn?
Oh my god, I can't even joke about this. It's fucking
it was really
terrible.
hard for me to even say
like,
those words.
Okay, so you can pass a law compelling actual doctors to give out false medical information to women who are seeking abortions. But if somebody who is not a doctor wants to dress up like one and give out false medical information, that's okay. Riddle me that.
I saw a documentary online where a woman dressed up. She wasn't really a nurse, but she dressed up in a nurse's uniform, and she had a stethoscope and everything. And this guy had a medical affliction, and he was in a bed. And it turns out that she wasn't a nurse at all. She just wanted to have sex with him. Wow. And she jumped up on the table, and that really threw me there. Like, what can we believe in if nurses aren't real?
It's a common problem. I've seen a lot of documentaries to that effect myself.
I've seen it on Brazzers.com. I saw it. Seymour Hersh thing. He did a thing on it. Oliver Stone. It's a real problem out there.
The fact that they base this on freedom of speech is also bullshit, because the Supreme Court has decided for a long time now that you have a right to unrestricted speech so long as that speech does not constitute a clear and present danger to people, right? The example they always use is shouting fire in a crowded theater. Like, this is a physical, material harm that the speech poses. And I think there's certainly an argument to be made that in the country with the highest maternal death rate in the fucking developed world, lying to someone to keep them from getting an abortion actually does constitute an immediate physical danger to that person.
Dead
These
ass.
are just people that.
Yeah.
These are
That's
just
why I
people
can't
that,
even joke about that. It's fucking
No, they're
disgusting.
They're just ghouls that don't believe that women are people.
Ugh.
There's a certain kind of argument about the justices on the Supreme Court just kind of like interpreting the letter of the law or something like that.
That's
these
fucking
Hell no, it's all
bullshit.
And like, and
They
it's not
say what
political,
they
but, like,
believe.
yeah.
They decide what they believe, and they come up with this really complex, hair-splitting, legal reasoning framework for it after the fact that like no reasonable person could possibly care about.
Jamie, Aaron, Andy, I'm sorry to cut you off, but you're erasing historical materialist voices, okay? What I want to say real quick is that if you look at the history of the United States of America, it was not until the 1960s that the Supreme Court and the judicial system in general became something that the left could look for validation of various civil rights. For most of U.S. history, it was a very, very reactionary, the most reactionary branch of the
United States government.
And we're returning to
US
form
society.
right now. So just like the New Deal and the post-war era where, rising wages and rising productivity was a bit of an aberration, we're seeing a fucking return to what is the norm, which is that the judiciary is there to block mob rule, to block emancipatory and redistributive movements, whether they come from Congress, whether they come from the executive, or whether they come from the streets. So, like, the Lochner Court, right, is obviously what people look back to, which shot down all the early New Deal proposals, right? Like, liberals out there, if you're a liberal and you're listening to this show, don't fucking rely on the Supreme Court, all right, to push your agenda. They've been reactionary. You had a nice little honeymoon for a while because social movements forced them to not be reactionary.
Totally.
But if you're going to sit there and wait for them to fucking decide, whether you have the right to have, I don't know, an abortion, or whether you have the right to organize as a union, or you have the right to fucking, come into this country, whether, you have brown skin or white skin or whatever it is, don't fucking wait. Fuck the Supreme Court and fuck any fucking liberal out there who tells you that these are the people that grant us our rights. You grant your own fucking rights, all right? We make the rights in the fucking streets. So fuck all that shit.
That's right. And similarly, now that these decisions have come down, don't fucking throw up your hands and say, oh, it's over. I guess we lost these rights and there's nothing we can do until these judges die and, President Kamala Harris gets to appoint some new ones or
President
whatever.
Cop.
I think like one of
Right.
the things that's really important here is the Supreme Court shifts with movements, and one of the and certainly like you have like an abortion rights movement that has just completely lent itself over to any Democrat that's willing to say that like they'll stand up for Roe v. Wade, to the degree that like you have the one institution Planned Parenthood won't even defend itself. It actually counts on like left-wing critics to actually come out and defend it and say like you have to stand up for yourself. I've been to a couple of demonstrations, counter protests in front of Planned Parenthood centers in New York over the past
they don't
few
want
years.
you to do that, right?
No,
Didn't they say that?
they're against that. Not only are they against that, but they're actually using like Trump laws and like Trump's NLRB to bust workers unionizing at
Oh
Planned
yeah, I
Parenthood.
saw that. That's fucking bullshit.
And it's just like, how
Didn't they
can
also
you...
come out against single-payer health care?
They did, yeah.
I mean, is the reasoning that they're afraid that whatever single-payer health care bill gets through will be so compromised that it will not cover abortion?
And it's certainly not, it's certainly not like roping in like Planned Parenthood, like the people at the top of Planned Parenthood who represent them publicly to like media and stuff like that, to rope them in with like people who volunteer there, who work for them, because like, obviously there are plenty of people who are work as a part of Planned Parenthood who disagree with this, but the people who real political their livelihood basically depends on like shaking hands with like the worst milquetoast Democrats out there, and
it's completely analogous to the union situation, right? So, like, I am a rank-and-file trade unionist, as people know, and as is Aaron, which we'll talk about later on. But fucking for I don't know how many decades now, because this history and this tradition of, like, militant struggle, on the shop floor and on picket lines and on the street has been lost. What the unions have relied on, as pretty much all the institutions that gained from all those decades of progressive advance that we had over the last 100 years or so, they rely on politicians. It's a fucking game. It's a political game, right? So, let's get this law passed about like, you need to get your OSHA 10. Let's pass this about you need like fall protection in order to be like blah, blah, blah. And it's like a roundabout way of going through politicians in order to strengthen your union when your union was created by fucking socialists. It was created by at least business unionists who were smart enough to understand, like Samuel Gompers, that there was a real conflict between labor and capital. Planned Parenthood, I'm sure, wasn't fucking formed by people who were like, oh, well, yeah, like abortion's like a necessary evil. We want to do this because, like, no one else will. And let's
safe,
just
legal, and rare, I believe, was the messaging from the Democratic Party.
Thank you. Safe, legal, and rare. Thank you, Hillary Clinton, right? It was a fucking movement in order to emancipate women's right to control their fucking body. And why the fuck, like you talk about counter protests, right? People expect things to go differently, but if you're letting the right wing go out and protest in front of Planned Parenthood, you're letting the contractors go and destroy unions, you're letting the fucking Janus decision go without a fucking general strike right now, right? Like, where the fuck do you think that these laws, these rights fucking came from? They never came from some bourgeois politician, some capitalist, some philanthropist gifting it upon us. We fucking took that right. So don't coast on some fucking bullshit. Oh, we got to support this, the most progressive candidate in this race. Fuck yourself. Go fuck yourself.
Well,
I'm fucking pissed.
Now
the whole beach is ruined. Like I forgot the whole beach.
Go back to the beach, Sean.
The beach is gone.
Let me be clear. I just want to be clear. I did not want this to happen. I don't think any of us wanted any of these decisions to happen. We do not like things that are going to hurt currently existing working class people in any way, shape, or form. But now that it has happened, we have options. We're not just going to roll over and die. Like this,
we're not, but there's a lot of people say, we have to wait till 2018 to the midterms.
These
so that
decisions,
we can do something.
like fucking David Axelrod, who's like, did we
Fuck
talk about
him and
this
his
last
mustache.
week? No, I don't think we did.
I want to use his mustache to clean a
He's
fucking
like,
toilet.
the most important
Give
thing.
him a swirly.
He was like, people should be civil to the Trump ghouls. Like, the most important thing right now is to organize, donate money to the Democratic Party, and most importantly, vote. And
it should be my civil right to
backwards.
give David Axelrod a fucking swirly because he's got a great mustache to clean the toilet.
But no,
I think go ahead.
I think the abortion thing is the perfect example because it is something that Democrats in good faith want to protect. And one of the only issues that they haven't sold out too hard through the years, and yet they've done a piss poor job protecting it because the Democrat conception of a woman's right to choose or a person who can get pregnant's right to choose does not come out of it. It's disconnected from any type of larger humanist, feminist movement.
Right.
It's just like you are defending the status quo of this one decision, where a much better approach, and I mean, I'm biased because I am a socialist feminist, but the socialist feminist approach would be to keep pushing it further. Like, okay,
maternity leave. All right, how is that not connected to fucking women's?
Now you have the legal right to an abortion. We also want the legal right to pay for an abortion if you can't afford one.
Yep.
You also want the right to be able to have a child if you want to and adequately care for the child. You want maternity leave. You
daycare.
Want state-provided daycare, all of that stuff.
Cradle to grave
and I
school.
Think these are
Government
things that
school.
people want to pretend that the Democrats would have gotten us by now if it weren't for those meddling Republicans, and that is just not fucking true.
Well, and in fact, so many of the one institution, I don't know, I guess to bring it back a little bit to Janus is the one institution that's consistently actually been able to win those things for working class women. Hasn't been the Democrats, it's been unions. It's been unions that have actually fought their employers and said, we need maternity leave, we need paternity leave, we need, on-site child care. I mean, those are things that have been lost over the decades as I think the unions have really demobilized their membership and relied more upon political clout, like you were describing, Sean, to sort of political clout and a stable relationship with management where bargaining is more determined by handshaking than mobilization on the shop floor. But I think the most important thing to say about again to kind of bring it back to Janus is I think it is a real loss for the working class, like you were saying, Jamie. But I think it's also a matter of, the most important message that we can say, I guess to reiterate your point is that. It's not over, that this isn't the end of the labor movement. In fact, the labor movement has proven in right-to-work states, like in New Mexico, that it can win and it can make serious gains if you rely more on the mobilization of your membership on the shop floor and in the workplace than you rely upon, backroom deals and shaking hands with Democrats.
Yeah, it really grinds my gears. It really chaps my ass when liberals try and scold me like I'm a small child who just doesn't understand the world because I have a systemic understanding of how change happens, and I see the Supreme Court as a trailing indicator of where we're at politically as a country, maybe like 10 years before, because they last a really long time usually. But I'm not saying that it's good that the Supreme Court is making these decisions. But at the same time, it's like, how does this not discredit your system of bourgeois justice and your designation of the Democratic Party as the sole guardian of these rights? They have done a piss poor job
by your own logic.
These rights
by your own logic.
And I'm sorry, these rights are too important to leave it up to them going forward.
I mean, we shouldn't leave policy victories of the left or whatever. We shouldn't leave the fate of the left up to whether or not some 81-year-old guy who spent his entire working life working for the American legal system to retire or not.
Right.
Yeah. Nobody wants to have to do this. Nobody wants to have to go on strike. Nobody wants to have to fucking riot in the streets. Although I will admit to watching riot porn on occasion. I know, TMI about our marital relations I think once more. But no one wants to do it. But
that's our other kink.
We're going to, we have to. We can't just take all of this lying down, and we can, vote for fucking Democrats, but don't rely on Democrats to protect you, because they have not done a great job in the past, and they probably will not in the future.
And again, I can't fucking say this enough, okay? I'm not even going to address anybody by name. The people out there, okay, who think that electing the right person is going to gain you the rights that maybe were gained for people in the 1930s or 60s or 70s. Electing the right person is the way to go. Open a fucking book. We'll do a whole episode on this, Open a book and see how public sector workers got the fucking right to organize. Totally. It was illegal for them to organize. You know what made it legal for public sectors, are being affected by this Janus decision, to be able to have a union, is they went on illegal fucking wildcat strikes. Mm-hmm. They fucking shut shit down state by state in the federal government, and it was such a mass movement that neither the feds nor the states nor the municipalities, none of them could fucking deal with the disruption it caused. So ex post facto, they legalized public sector unions for labor peace. And what Janus does now, all right, and I think Alito in his majority decision talks about, there's not enough justification for labor peace, in this agency fees thing, right? What these motherfuckers forget, whether they're on the Supreme Court, whether it's the Koch brothers sitting on some corporate board, whether it's the fucking Democrats, whoever it is, right? What they forget is that just because the union density rate is lower in this country, just because the working class is relatively quiet right now, does not mean the class struggle does not go on. The class struggle continues. As long as we have capitalism, there will be a conflict between capital and labor. So you want to give up on labor peace, all right? You want to drop labor peace from the agenda? We'll fucking give you labor war, motherfuckers. We'll fucking give it to you. Because we should have been acting for the last fucking 20, 30, 40 years while the working class was under attack, that the National Labor Relations Act and Taft-Hartley didn't exist in the fucking first place, been wildcatting, been militant on the fucking shop floor, done secondary boycotts and all that shit. But if you were under the illusion that that labor system was going to protect you, there's no fucking illusions anymore. Hit the fucking pavement, hit the fucking picket lines, wildcat, do whatever sabotage, do whatever the fuck you got to do, because right now they've thrown that out the window. The Supreme Court's thrown that out the window. The Democrats have let that get thrown out the window. So fucking fight. If there's no labor peace, there's fucking labor war.
Hell yeah.
Jones is back.
What if we gave a general strike and everybody came?
Seriously, we got to get back to that shit.
Just throwing it out there.
We got to get back to that shit. Anybody who fucking thinks that your rights, whether on the shop floor or elsewhere, are given to you by some fucking suit-wearing, tie-wearing motherfucking piece of shit, fuck that. The rights come from you.
You're dumb as a dog.
You're dumb as a fucking dog.
Go fuck yourself.
You stupid bitch.
You stupid bitch.
Bunch of twats.
That's a little too much tuna for me. Speaking of labor rights and unions, I'm going to pee, and then Aaron will tell us a little bit more about white-collar unions. Go off, King.
I would love to.
That was
a good rant?
that
I need to
was
go
so
pee, too.
hot, babe. You're gonna get so many fans of every gender just from that one rant. So, speaking of labor unions, our guest today was part of a recent organizing drive at the New Yorker that got quite a bit of media attention. Can you give us any updates on that? Or perhaps you'd like to talk about it in a more general way.
The campaign is still ongoing. We haven't gotten recognition yet, but with over 90% of the office signing union authorization cards saying they want to be a part of a union, believing that it's important to be a part of a union to have a voice at the table to to negotiate their workplace conditions. I think management at the company seems to be really responding to that. So I can say that, but I think it's still ongoing. So there's not a lot of details that I can go into. I mean, I think that like the New Yorker union effort, I think it really succeeded in part because of a shifting at like a real shift in not only in media but in like white collar workplaces in general.
Yeah, I was going to say, but Aaron, I'm doing what I love. I have a liberal arts degree. Unions couldn't possibly be for me, or could they?
Isn't $12,000 a year and with no benefits enough if it's something you love doing? That's the Vice magazine model.
Oh my God. Oh,
Joining a union doesn't have. I mean, it certainly doesn't have to be about not loving what you do. In fact, I think, and certainly at the New Yorker, I mean, I think the precisely one of the reasons why people wanted to join the union was because they love what they do. They love the publication that they work for, but it wasn't enough to be able to keep them there. I mean, for a lot of people, it's been very hard to imagine continuing to work there over the next couple of years, contributing to something that they really believe in and doing something that they love and raising a family on it. As one coworker put it really aptly, for a long time, the expectation at the office has been that you were expected to eat prestige, to be able to eat prestige. And
heard that one before.
And I think that I think that the union is a really important. I mean, unions are the only way that workers have ever had a voice at the table.
But Aaron, I thought millennials were just a bunch of sexless, childless layabouts who would love to work for $30,000 a year forever and live in an apartment with 6 roommates because that's just the culture.
I can't speak to the first two.
You ever watch Girls?
That very might well be the case that many millennials are sexless and childless.
Just what we're like.
I mean, I think that one of the really incredible things that's been happening is since the since the economic crisis, like all the way back in 2007, 2008. You have a whole generation of people that are graduating school, going into the workplace with expectations that they should be paid fairly for what they do, that work shouldn't have to be grueling, to put it as our friend from MSNBC said earlier, that they should be able to have bread and roses too.
Not just survive, but thrive.
And and recognize that the bosses aren't going to give that to you because you ask them nicely. Politicians aren't going to give that to you because they're too spineless. But one thing that can happen is that if you organize your coworkers, you can have a seat at the table and negotiate workplace conditions with management. And more people have been doing that. So just in media, 2,000 people, over 2,000 people have joined either the News Guild, which is what I'm a member of, or the Writers Guild of America over the past several years.
Yeah, we saw Gawker do it. Vice did it. My favorite part of that recent long, juicy article that came out about Vice in New York Magazine
that was really good.
The tidbit that the union effort was kind of stalled until that fancy fucking Lad Monthly or whatever came out with that article.
Fancy Lad
about
Monthly. I get that every month.
about Shane Smith's $60 million mansion in Malibu.
Yeah.
And after that, it happened very quickly.
Look at where all our surplus value is going.
And I think one thing to point out that's important is it's not just sort of like newer digital media like Vice and Gawker. I think that those campaigns really were able to show people across the industry that this is something that people can do at their own workplaces. And more recently, you had certainly at our office, we were very inspired by the campaign at the LA Times and at the Chicago Tribune. Not just because of it's like old, not just because it's like older legacy, quote unquote legacy print media or whatever, as people say in the industry or whatever.
It's
but
weird
also,
that they were not already unionized. No,
those two papers are actually some of the most traditionally anti-union papers in the country. And what made the
their editorial point of view.
Editorial line was aggressively anti-union historically. Certainly the Chicago Tribune, and the LA Times, like just as equally. I mean, yeah, they were very aggressively anti-union papers who were owned by a company called Trunk, which was formerly known as Tribune Media, and when they where they fought the union.
I've got a lot of dates off of Trunk, actually. I swipe right always on Trunk. Sorry, go on.
Where Trunk fought the union very aggressively at the LA Times, they actually gave voluntary recognition to the workers at the Chicago Tribune. And I think that really suggests not only the strength of and the confidence of people of many people in white collar workplaces, especially in media, feeling confident that they can organize a union successfully, but that the bosses in this industry are increasingly recognizing that union organization is becoming a matter of fact. And
hell yeah.
And it's, I mean, I think to step out of media for a second, I think one thing that we've seen over the past 2 weeks that's been really interesting is that this isn't just something that for lack of a better term, I suppose, like this is something that young workers are increasingly recognizing, that they have power in their workplace and that they can change their own conditions through that. So I think, we were talking earlier about the Janus case and about this sort of like national right to work in public sector unions. And I think the one thing that we have to look at more than like that defeat and that loss is if we want inspiration, all we have to do is look at those teacher strikes that have been like whipping across the country.
Deadass.
And one of the reasons why the right has been pushing so hard for this is precisely because teachers have been some of the most like militant, have represented some of the most militant and active and well-organized sections of the working class. And a lot of those strikes, the people at the center of them, I mean, not exclusively by any means, but a lot of the people that have taken on a lot of the leadership in those strikes and those mobilizations have been young workers who come into education and who know that, who don't, who really understand that if you're going to get anything, you're not going to get it. If you're going to change anything, you're not going to change it by asking politely. You have to fight for it.
Hell yeah.
Here's a fun little anecdote, and I won't tell the name of the person who told me this because he is a rank and file teacher at the DOE in New York City. But he basically said that the way the votes break down right now within the New York City AFT, retirees get the same vote as current, younger teachers do at this point. Basically, there's a conservative.
That doesn't seem fair.
It doesn't. They're actually trying to change
They're not the ones who have to go to work still.
But they have a lot of say because they're the ones that are sitting on their retirement, which they earned for all those years. So whatever. But the younger, if you look at the people who are actually teaching right now, if you took the retirees out of the voting pool in terms of the democratic process of electing union leadership, it would actually go to the, I'd say, soft Trotskyist caucus. Aaron, you might be hyped on that. That exists within the AFT because basically, like, the younger group of teachers and the teachers who are facing the material conditions right now under education are far more radicalized. So when, like, I don't know, in like 4 or 5 years, 10 years maybe, when like all those retired New York City teachers in Florida, shuffle off their mortal coil, it's entirely possible that in that white-collar union, you might actually see some movement because it's kind of like you said, a generational thing, right?
I mean, I don't think it's exclusively generational, but I do think that you do have to take into account the fact that you have young workers who are disproportionately sympathetic to unions, who are disproportionately critical of capitalism and sympathetic to socialism, are entering workplaces and are being told that, like, hey, if you're doing what you love, you got it good, who are told, their entire life, like, follow your dreams or whatever, and they come into workplaces and then, they're told that you can't have parental leave if you have a kid, that you're going to make like, poverty wages, and that you have like 1 week of vacation.
And what you
that's
said,
okay, though, because we're perma-children. That's just our culture and our values. It's certainly not the other way around.
Right.
It's not like one's material conditions could determine one's culture or values or lifestyle. That's ridiculous.
What you talked about with living on prestige, like, kind of reminds me of the German term Luftmenschen, I think, which means like people who survive off of air. It's like there might have been a time when like getting a job at the New Yorker and the prestige that was attached to that could have been a stepping stone to like a higher level of like media, I don't know, employment shit, but there's not anything. It's not there anymore.
Babe, there's no higher level than the New Yorker.
That's what I'm saying. So the prestige,
there hasn't been. I don't know that there has ever been.
That's what I'm saying. So that prestige, the idea that you can live off of prestige and like $20,000 a year, may have like gaslighted some people like 20, 30 years ago. But with the media landscape now, like, where do people think they're going to go from the New Yorker? Like the New York Times, there's like 300 jobs there.
There was
like, you're not.
New Yorker, there's a political cartoon from somebody in the New Yorker Union, I assume, of like Lucius P. Featherbottom, or whatever that guy's name is, looking at a butterfly.
Ah, the butterfly.
And the butterfly was labeled cultural capital or cultural prestige or something. And he's saying, "Is this a fair wage?"
Wow. I actually can't believe I didn't see that.
You didn't do that?
No,
you didn't do that?
I just assumed that you made that.
Yeah, you're like the socialist meme master over there.
I mean, surprise, surprise, there's a lot of really creative people that work at the New Yorker.
Yeah, fuck yeah.
Don't say.
Well,
I think...
I have a bit of more of a jaded view of this media organizing drive because, like, I don't want to send the message that it's easy. Like, you should definitely do it. People should do it. But it's, like, really hard work, and it might not always happen. Like, I can say this now because it's over, and it's definitely not going to happen. But I tried to organize my company.
You tried hard.
And it did not go so well when I worked at Spin Media. And yet, I mean, it was slow. It was really slow going.
Are you saying it wasn't glamorous work? It was, like, really painstaking, anonymous work?
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, I didn't care if I got fired from Death and Taxes, so that was like a point in my column because I just hated that job so much because my shitty boss was a stupid asshole who sexually harassed me and had bad politics.
His name starts with a B, ends with a Ryan. Fuck that.
I mean, the only reason I did not write a Me Too story about him is because he's too much of a nobody for anyone to care. So...
we'll deal with him after the rap.
I guess there are some advantages to being a fucking loser that nobody cares about. But anyway, I talked to a whole bunch of people one-on-one. Nobody wanted to help me do this. They were all pretty positive about it, but they're like, also, you know, I don't want to stick my neck out. I don't want to get in trouble. I don't want to do any extra work at work. Everyone's like looking for the next thing. Like, oh, why are you looking for the next thing? Why don't you want to stay here for years and years? Probably because your job is shitty and it sucks and there's high turnover and like you don't think you have a voice in the company because you don't. So like it takes work to change that. I was willing to put in the work. Not a lot of people were. They were all really, I don't know. Like I think some of it might be a class thing. Like a lot of people who work in media are sort of downwardly mobile children of privilege. I mean, self included, but it hasn't really hit home for them yet that this is like not a sustainable way to live or run the media. It also like obviously decreases the diversity in the media, which is definitely a bad thing. I think we can all agree, like you shouldn't have to be from a privileged background to be a writer or a reporter or whatever. But like even more than that, I think they just didn't think it was possible, or they like people want to bet on a winning horse. They want to be on a winning side. And like, I got a little, not too much hostility, but like, I don't know, maybe it was a function of my own personality or whatever, but some people just did not want to talk to me. And still, I tried so hard. I used all the interpersonal skills I had at my disposal and then some. And like I saw that some people were mad about how the Gawker unionization drive went. They didn't felt like they were really in the loop. So I was like, oh, I'm going to be sensitive and slow and blah, blah, blah. And then I talked to Hamilton Nolan, actually, one of the Gawker union guys.
Hamno. Shout out.
At one of
read Capital, Hamno. You do great work, but you do even better if you read Capital. Go on.
I think he's read a part of it. I think I asked him about this once. But
read more.
I went to one of his...
Volumes 2, 3.
I went to one of his media labor happy hours, and he's like, what are you doing? Just make a Facebook event. So I was like, all right, I've talked to enough people, probably. I've got enough people on board at this point who would like say they would sign a card. So maybe I will. And I'd been talking to the WGA folks. They were helping me as much as they could from the outside, but it was really up to, you know, people who work at the company, and everyone wanted me to do it for them, which is kind of not by definition, a union is something that you do together, right? So they're like, oh, you know, crazy Jamie, she's a communist. She's just going to do this shit and maybe it'll work out and maybe it won't, but it's not on us. So I was actually working on making the Facebook event with the WGA when the sale went through. And this happened over Christmas break when we were all out is when they announced it. The company, half of it got sold to a bigger company that owns Billboard and The Hollywood Reporter. And some of the sites, including sites where I had, got some strong supporters, just like were cut adrift to wither and die in the seas of the current economic landscape. So after that happened, I was like, fuck, like this is a much bigger company. I don't know anyone there. It occupies the whole floor of a fucking skyscraper in Midtown. It's a whole floor. And I was like, this was the only thing keeping me going at this job. Like, I hated my job so much. You remember, babe? Like,
yes, I do.
came home crying from the DNC because my boss was so mean to me during the whole 2 weeks that I did the RNC and the DNC.
Welcome to my world. My foreman, you're a prick. I know you're not listening to this, but fuck you. And my shop steward, you can fucking go fuck yourself.
So after that, I was like, I can't do this anymore. And then I went to a witch circle with my good friend Debbie, where we all cried and talked about our feelings.
You took mushrooms too, don't lie.
I was maybe on mushrooms and or
Plant
acid
medicine.
at the time. She roped us into a witch circle. It felt right. We burned some sage. It was a new moon ceremony, so we wrote the things we wanted to get rid of on pieces of paper.
Did you menstruate into the ground?
We menstruated into the ground. It was beautiful.
That's a labor action right there.
And
You ate a child.
Made matzah out of its blood.
no, like Debbie's, she's definitely working
religion.
up to that. Like she sent us a photo of a pig that was sacrificed and eaten at one of these solstice rituals, and I'm like, wow, one of these days she's just gonna send us a photo of a human, and we're all gonna be like, that's cool, Debbie.
I somehow missed this whole part about
anyway.
a witch circle at the last Labor Notes conference. About
That's in the workers' toolbox, the militant workers' toolbox, is a witch circle.
Like, social democracy is a code word for communism, and communism is a code word for Satanism. So,
hell yeah.
like, you're maybe like a couple steps removed from the program.
Listen, fedoras, where you're really
I've
going.
never felt so red.
But anyway, I quit my job right after that and admitted defeat, and it sucked. Oh, and not to mention, it really would have helped us to have a union at the time of the sale because
totally.
a lot of people lost their jobs and they got, in some cases. Oh, and the severance was based on the amount of time that Spin Media in its current or now prior iteration had existed. So like someone who worked at Death and Taxes for several years only got severance based on his seniority since the sale to Spin Media.
Look, people I know who are at Al Jazeera English, I believe that they announced their union or they had it hadn't gotten recognition yet, but when they were closed, they were able to, to negotiate their severance. The union at Univision, at Gizmodo, like a union can't prevent, unions right now are not going to prevent, terrible stuff from happening at work. They're not going to prevent layoffs. They're not going to prevent, a lot of things. I mean, I think there's a lot that could be done within the labor movement to organize to make sure that, that stuff doesn't happen. But right now where things are at, it's a lot to ask for a union to be able to prevent, every single layoff. But what they were able to do at Gizmodo was negotiate their severance to something really, something considerably higher than what management was initially offering. And I think that's really important to have.
Yeah, and some people want to say that if we unionize in the media, there's just not enough money to go around and it's going to make our jobs go away. It's going to kill the industry. The industry is dying no matter what we do.
Well, I also don't think
we might as well have a
money to
soft
throw around
landing
when they're hiring expensive consultancies and in some cases very expensive anti-union law firms in order to fight their unions.
Yeah, fair.
I mean, I do think that one thing you said earlier, I think is just really important to reiterate. I don't know, is, look, unionizing is difficult. There's a reason why people don't do it all the time. It's often, and especially maybe in white collar, or so-called professional unions, maybe it is more immediately rational to, instead of changing your workplace conditions, try your hand at the labor market to improve your workplace, to improve your own conditions or something like that. And it takes a lot of work. It took years for us to even build and organize. I wasn't, I didn't start, and not that anyone here is saying that, but I've had to clarify this to some socialist friends of mine. I didn't start the drive at the New Yorker. I was brought in after years of organizing had happened, and was able to get on, early on in a whole new phase of it. It takes a lot of work to do this stuff and to talk to your coworkers, and it takes a lot of patience and a lot of, I mean, especially a lot of patience, not just with people that you're talking to, but with your own workplace conditions. It's very difficult to do. It takes a lot of time. It was very unglamorous and boring. I had drank way too much coffee for a year because I would talk to my coworkers and say, hey, can we get a coffee and talk about work? And that was really hard. It's very difficult to do. It's also I've been a socialist my entire adult life, and unionizing my workplace was the most politically rewarding thing I've ever done.
Fuck yeah.
Hell yeah. And failing to unionize my workplace was one of the most disappointing things I've ever failed to do. And yet I learned a lot from it.
So, to round out this discussion on white collar or media unions, to channel Kaiser Soze for a second, the greatest trick the devil ever played in the United States with its labor law was to codify that white-collar professional workers who work for a wage are separate from blue-collar workers. There's a lot of critique of the NLRA and the Wagner Act of the 1930s and the Taft-Hartley Act, of course, of the 1940s about what it did in terms of taking domestic labor, which usually meant POC female labor in the South, and also farm labor, which meant sharecropping labor, black and white in the South.
Can you explain what these acts were for people who don't know?
Well, the Wagner Act was the National Labor Relations Act, which created the National Labor Relations Board, which is essentially the labor regime that we live under to this day. That created a separate body that mediated between labor and capital, and for the first time in U.S. history, codified the right for people to collectively bargain and organize within a workplace. It happened under the New Deal, early in the New Deal, and was instrumental in creating the mass industrial unionism that we saw not only in the 30s and 40s, but continued into the Fordist era of the post-war period in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, the quote-unquote golden age of American capitalism, where, you could go from job to job and you can make a good salary, you could raise 2, 3, 4 kids, send them to college and all that good stuff. That whole Make America Great Again thing was predicated on a certain segment of the working class, which is to say a white industrial working class, being able to collectively bargain within the workplace in order to get all the things that we're fighting a rearguard action to try to get back again, like pensions and stability in the job, yada, yada, yada. But the greatest trick the bourgeoisie ever pulled was to try to separate white-collar labor from blue-collar labor. Because within all of these laws that were passed in order to create a labor relations regime in the United States, certain segments of workers were excluded from that, and a lot of that was white-collar workers. So if you look at the huge difference between, let's say, the labor history of European countries that have very strong social democratic states and have a lot of still class unity based around that, and the U.S., it was that those countries were able to basically have the white-collar professional class also be within the labor movement. Therefore, there wasn't this sort of false, antagonism between people who put a blue collar on, people who put a white collar on, or a pink collar on, or whatever.
Oh, you mean like the memo circulated by Jonah Peretti where he says that unions are only for construction workers?
Right. I mean, I am one of those, and I would really love to see more and more white collar workers organized, because we need to break down those boundaries between what we are as proletarians. And if you're making fucking $25,000 a year working for Vice or a New York magazine, you're just as prole as somebody who fucking goes and fucking bangs on with a demo saw or a chipping hammer for fucking 8 hours a day, right? You're selling your labor to survive.
Oh, you mean you can't pay your rent in cultural capital?
In the building trades, we cannot pay our rent in any capital whatsoever. We have negative.
I don't know about
capital.
you, but whenever my rent is due, I just get the landlord invited to some really cool parties, and that's totally enough.
I try to bring the landlord to the work site to watch us fly like giant prefab pieces of concrete, and they never show up, so it doesn't work out. But there was an attempt to do this, right? It's not that the American left, the American labor union, didn't try. And when I was a teacher for apprentices and trade unions, before I actually decided that, wow, these kids made a lot of money, and I want to do what a lot of my family members did, which is join the trades and actually have like a stable, good-paying job. One of the stories I would tell them is about the stockbrokers going on strike in 1946. Does anyone know about this?
No.
So imagine, looking back, stockbrokers on strike. Stockbrokers in the 1940s were basically like these, very poorly paid, schlubby fucking guys with fedora hats who would go and they'd like put the tickets up and say buy, sell,
Yeah,
sell,
I just
sell.
know they yell that out a lot while waving little pieces of paper.
Exactly.
Is that right?
Yep, that pieces of paper, they'd yell. That was their job, basically. Like stockbrokers now, you make a lot of money, but back then it was just kind of a menial job. And the stockbrokers, before Taft-Hartley in 47, which was a very reactionary bill that took away a lot of labor rights in this country, in 46, the stockbrokers put up a hard picket in front of the New York Stock Exchange. And this was a white-collar movement in order to organize stockbrokers in the U.S., believe it or not. And the cops were like laughing and the bosses were laughing. They're like, these fucking stupid, stockbrokers, these fucking cucks, we're going to break up their picket line real easy. So the cops came and they said, hey, stockbrokers, you have to disperse. You're not legally allowed to organize. And they started to rough these guys up. But this is a beautiful thing. And I think it shows like a multiverse where we could have had a different American labor history, because at that moment, a call had been made to their fellow proletarian brothers in the Seafarers International Union, which was right up the street from Wall Street. So as the cops came in to break up the stockbrokers' picket line, about 4,000 maritime workers with basically axe handles and giant fucking poles and other tools that they used on their job ran up and defended the stockbrokers, beat the shit out of the cops, and basically joined the picket line with the stockbrokers. So that goes to show, again, this false dichotomy between like, okay, so you do industrial labor, you do construction, or this, that, and the other thing, or you do like media work, or you're an Ask Me like civil servant employee. So you're in different categories. Like, why would you want to organize? You have a high prestige job. There was the possibility 70 years ago within the labor movement, there were radicals pushing for this, for that to be collapsed. And for us to have an entirely different type of labor movement that brought in workers from all different sectors together. But the bourgeoisie and the state thought it, and they were smart about this, thought it very, very advantageous to them to keep these sectors of the workplace apart from one another. So the Seafarers Union ended up coming in solidarity and smashing up the cops, and the stockbrokers ended up losing their strike anyway, because in 47 the reactionary Taft-Hartley law comes down. But again, this is kind of an alternative history right now where white-collar, blue-collar, pink-collar workers could have organized together, could have been part of a larger labor umbrella that had militancy, not just in what we consider to be the white working class or the industrial trades, right? But could have been spanned across the entire economy. So the union density rate would have been a lot higher. And obviously we would have not had a lot of the sort of, I don't know, like resentment that you see between these white collar folks and like, oh, you're just a mechanic, or you're just a carpenter, or you're just this, that, and the other thing. You have a union. Why do you make so much money? I'm slaving away making this fucking spin media money. So
can you imagine that happening today, by the way? Like the fucking fishmongers come down to the New Yorker building and like join the picket line, all salty and sea-scented.
That's the world we want. That's the world leftists want to see.
I mean, we've been seeing a little bit of sort of cross-profession solidarity with the teachers' strikes, right? Like the bus drivers joined in, and all the different cafeteria workers and auxiliary workers related to the schools. And like they have also been striking for the benefits of those workers too. And teachers are in a unique position because they're such a central part of the community. Like Sam likes to harp on this a lot because he's a dad. Like parents want to talk to teachers as much as possible. So they're uniquely well positioned, and will hopefully show solidarity with more different professions as these things progress. I think what you're saying also speaks to how little vocabulary Americans have right now to talk about class. And in a lot of instances, class has been completely replaced by cultural signifiers I think oftentimes race is also used as a substitution for class. But one weird trick that liberals hate. One thing that the conservative movement has done and that right populism has done is change the definition of the elites from the financial elites to the cultural elites.
That's so good.
So that a fucking, upper middle class, like small business owning dad who owns like a car dealership, but has like, what did Chapo say about him? Like a fucking horseshoe over the front of his house.
And a Ford F-150.
Considers himself to be part of the working class because he, watches Fox News all day and hates books. When in fact, like, no, dude, you are part of the capitalist class. You are part of an exploiter class. Meanwhile, I'm working away at the fucking blog factory, working overtime.
Or the podcast mines.
I'm working overtime at the fucking click mines, making like, $20,000 a year or whatever. But I'm dealing with words and, maybe using my degree that I got in college. So that somehow makes me like a higher class person than the aforementioned.
Right. It is a total distraction, and it's something that hopefully this younger generation, as you guys have spoken about with your organizing campaigns and what we've seen across this country, hopefully will get past, which is a true class analysis, which is that all the people that have just one thing to sell in order to survive, which is their labor power, their ability to work, with whether that's with their muscles or with their brains, actually have far more unity with one another and should have solidarity with one another than the F-150 driving, ski-doo, dealership owning, fucking Trump voting piece of shit.
Yeah, don't take it from David Brooks. Knowing the names of fancy sandwiches does not have any bearing on your class relations to the mode of production.
But also, too, like fancy sandwiches
That's actually
are awesome.
how I pay my rent.
Prosciutto
in knowing
great.
the names of fancy sandwiches?
Whenever my
Gabagool.
landlord asks me for my rent, I always just start reciting the names of different cured
Capicola,
cured
Gabagool.
meats. Yeah.
So it's now...
I eat my avocado toast. He's like, oh, forget it.
That's more than enough for me.
So we're now finishing up, and it's 10:24 p.m. on July 1st, 2018, and it looks like in Mexico that AMLO, Obrador, the leftist candidate, is set to win in the election. But we will pick up with Mexico in a day or so, and then finish this episode out.
Actually, can I finish with my attempt at an Alex Jones impression? Everyone else tried. I didn't get a chance
No, go
to.
for it, yeah.
Okay, hold on. Alex Jones.